This weekend features the best atmosphere in college football. Arguably, or perhaps not, the loudest stadium, the highest stakes rivalry, home field winning streaks, staring down a team that has absolutely vexed them. A potential family feud and a bitter rivalry, and the two unluckiest teams in America squaring off. So many things on the biggest weekend of college football yet. Glad to have you with us on the College GameDay Podcast. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel here. Pete, I'm anxious to dive in to Penn State, Oregon, into Alabama, Georgia, into LSU, Ole Miss, even taking a quick little gander at Ohio State, Washington. But as often happens in college football, news gets in the way. And a lot of it centers in the state of Oklahoma. First, the Heisman Trophy favorite, or at least he was, prior to the news of John Mateer's injury. The Oklahoma quarterback will be out for a while with an injury to his hand. We'll get to that. But the second longest tenured coach in college football, a man who really defined Oklahoma State football, Mike Gundy. His tenure comes to a close. The Cowboys pulling the plug on what had been a reeling program as they decide to make a change with the guy who really has elevated them to heights that they hadn't seen consistently. He was a great player there and their winningest coach. And now the Cowboys are going to try to move on without him for the rest of this season and into the future.
Yeah, and there's so much about Mike Gundy's ledger, Rece, that's impressive. And I think we need to start there, right? We need to start with what was accomplished, because I think of all the Mike Gundy numbers that really stand out to me, he finished there with 170 victories, and no other coach in school history is within 100 victories of Mike Gundy. So when you talk about longevity, difficulty of venue to win, he basically, like there is the mean of a program, what they are and who they are traditionally. And he outpaced it exponentially, reset it. And then as the world changed, and look, he had shortcomings, he failed to adopt to the world. Like in Mike Gundy's career obituary, failure to evolve will be there. It wasn't that he was a bad coach. He did not stay up with the times. He was very vocal about not wanting to. And they eventually tried it was just too late. I mean, they had 10 new coaches this year. They had a whole new roster. The athletic director, Chad Weiberg, was, sort of saying, hey, we have an expensive roster last night. Well, their roster stinks. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's filled with bad players. It just was an avalanche of lack of preparedness on all levels, and starting with Gundy's unwillingness to evolve. And it's going to be a long season there and a long dig out, and they're going to try to market that program to that it can be what Gundy brought them to.
I think the thing, and Oklahoma State fans have a lot that they should thank Mike Gundy for. They came within an upset on a Friday night of playing for the national championship in the 2011 season, and Mike Gundy will argue until his final breath that they should have played in that championship game anyway. Great team there. He had great players, a couple of names that Justin Blackman, Des Bryant. There are many others, but those were two that jumped to mind. Brandon Whedon, coming back from baseball to play and lead Oklahoma State to great heights under the leadership of Mike Gundy. And you saw so many players, Mason Rudolph, so many players in the aftermath expressing their thanks to Mike Gundy for what he had done for their careers and what he had done for them personally. But for Oklahoma State fans, I think the one thing that they shouldn't speak ill of Mike Gundy. They should only praise Gundy and his mullet and everything he did because of this. They call the rivalry with Oklahoma Bedlam. Bedlam implies that it's insane. You don't know what's going to happen. Except in this rivalry, you know exactly what's going to happen. Oklahoma's going to win because they always have. Oklahoma State's record in the Bedlam rivalry, 20, 91, and 7 ties. Now, that is one thing on the field that Mike Gundy never quite got because no one got beating Oklahoma consistently. But when Oklahoma moved on to the SEC, when they left Oklahoma State behind as lesser than, whether it was directly articulated that way, it was most certainly implied. You don't get to come with us. We don't care about you. We're going with Texas. And you know what? Oklahoma's right. They are a bigger brand than Oklahoma State. Doesn't mean Oklahoma State wasn't good. And it doesn't mean that they couldn't finish things by getting a little pound of flesh. And Oklahoma State won 2 of the last 3 in the rivalry. And on one of the more glorious nights for Oklahoma State football, Mike Gundy sent Lincoln Riley away. He sent Caleb Williams away. And he sent Oklahoma away with a big fat L in the Bedlam rivalry. And Oklahoma State fans should be grateful for everything, but they'll always have that night. I hope they play that game again because it's a fun game despite Oklahoma's dominance. But there's a little piece of me saying, if I grew up bleeding cowboy orange, that I would go, we're good. We're good. Go on, have your fun over there. We won 2 of the last 3, and we ruined things for you on your way out the door, and we'll let that set for a little while.
To me, Gundy's going to be remembered, Rece, as sort of the archetype of the smaller school foil. Like, what a better you couldn't have crafted a better nemesis. Dan Jenkins couldn't have sat in his best fever dream and come up with a character like Mike Gundy. He was completely beat to his own drum. He was completely unaffected by anything around him. He did exactly what he wanted, and he was a brilliant football coach. He hired great assistant coaches. His offenses were always on the cutting edge. His teams played hard. He was a high-end in-game strategist. I mean, everything about Mike Gundy, the coach, was the highest level. But he understood the Lee Corso-ism. It's the entertainment business, sweetheart. And Mike Gundy gave us some entertainment. He knew how to draw attention to a place where attention isn't inherent. Stillwater, Oklahoma is a wisp of a town. It's maybe 45 minutes from Oklahoma City, maybe if you wined and dined a little bit. And he made it at times one of the centers of the college football universe. Very, very impressive. And look, the same stubbornness that allowed him to lift that place up for 2 decades ultimately ended up being his downfall. Like a lot of these guys, it's Shakespearean, right? Your greatest strength becomes your greatest weakness. A lot of good on the ledger of Mike Gundy. Will be interesting to see where they go and how they do it. Tough guy to follow. Nobody's going to talk about it like following Nick or anything, but there are a lot of guys who at Alabama who won titles before Nick. There was nobody who accomplished much of significance nationally at Oklahoma State prior to Mike Gundy. So a very difficult standard to chase.
It's a really interesting concept about programs that have had trouble winning, as Oklahoma State has, when you find the right guy and then finding another guy, as opposed to a place, there have been exceptions, but, as I go back through the Rolodex, Dennis Franchione at Alabama wasn't eligible to compete for a title, but they may well have won one in 2002. Mike Shula didn't, shadowed by probation, but even Mike DuBose won the SEC. Gene Stallings won the national championship. Some of those programs find ways to find coaches who win. Other ones, like Oklahoma State, like we've talked about with Cignetti in Indiana, when you find the guy, sometimes there's a guy that has the secret sauce, and Gundy certainly did. I want to wrap Gundy on this one. You mentioned him finding coaches, and it was novel. So many head coaches go in to that and they think, okay, what does my contact list look like? Who has at least a secondary connection to me? I remember Mike telling me one time, I think it was when he hired Yurcich. He hired a couple of guys from lower levels of ball, and who's back with him now or has been. He hired Yurcich maybe from Shippensburg or someplace like that.
Believe it was, yes.
Yeah, and he was like, I started looking at the list of who was producing big numbers on offense, and then I went and watched the tape. Okay, I like this, and then he called the guy. And now they still had to fit. He didn't call him and say, hey, I watched your tape. I wanted to, I want to hire you. He watched it and said, okay, I like what he's doing. Let me see if I like him. And he's done that with defensive coordinators. He's done it with position coaches. He tried to salvage this last season with some pressure, I think, of hiring veteran guys and bringing back guys. Didn't work. And, that's an unfortunate thing. And it'll be interesting. His brother Cale said that Mike would coach again, and he was going with him. So that'll be a fascinating thing to see if he gets back into coaching. Now at Oklahoma, Pete, they've got their own issues right now. As we touch on this before we move in to talking about this huge weekend of college football. John Mateer broken bone in his hand. What do we have there in terms of timeline and what Oklahoma expected versus what actually happened with the injury when he first got banged up? Because he still threw for 270 yards or whatever against Auburn, I think.
Yeah. I think he completed his last 11 passes with a broken hand. So here's where we are with Mateer, Rece. We are taping this on Wednesday morning. John Mateer is in Los Angeles, and he is headed to surgery this morning for a broken bone in his right throwing hand. He broke it in the first quarter against Auburn, and essentially went and played the entire game through the through the pain with it. I was told by sources last night the surgery is fairly straightforward, and he's expected to miss about a month. Hard to set a timeline before they do the surgery, but they went and sought out Dr. Stephen Shin, who's one of the country's leading hand and wrist surgeons. He's worked on Drew Brees, Steph Curry, and Mike Trout. So that's a pretty good ledger for Dr. Shin. So they're obviously taking this very seriously, sending him to the best person in the world, and we should see plenty of John Mateer. The good news for Oklahoma through this is they have a bye, and then they have Kent. And so that's going to give them some cushion. Mike Hawkins, who started 4 games for them last year, who's a highly regarded prospect out of the Dallas area, will become the starter again. It'll be an interesting test to see how he meshes in with Ben Arbuckle's system. But they have a little runway here, right? They got a couple weeks to get him ready in practice. Kent State is one of the worst teams in major college football. So they're going to have a little bit of time to get him adjusted and going. And then we'll kind of take the temperature of the week of Red River, see where John Mateer is. That's in about 3 weeks. And then see, moving forward from there, what his timeline is coming back.
I know nothing is bigger in the minds of Oklahoma fans than Texas, but there is a bigger picture here.
Yes.
And I'm not a doctor. If Mateer's ready to go, he's ready to go.
Yeah.
That's fine. If he's not ready to go, there's a bigger picture here for the Sooners to make sure that when he comes back,
you need your right hand if you're a quarterback. You need your right hand to be working.
That's the other thing, Pete, that I think makes it. You can say healed. But that's the one thing that I think even a doctor would tell you is unpredictable. When's it going to feel right? It can be healed, medically ready to go. When's it going to, feel normal for John and throwing the ball? When can he start throwing again? All of that. So wish him well. Can't wait to see him back on the field. He's electric, great to watch, and I'm sure the surgery will go well. And whenever he gets back, I'm sure he'll get that Sooner offense humming again. In the meantime, Hawkins, yet another guy in that whole quarterback issue of the greater Dallas area. Hawkins, highly regarded. Jackson Arnold. Mateer was the least regarded among the 3 coming out of high school. Now he becomes the biggest star, and Hawkins will have to fill in for him while he recovers from the surgery. We certainly wish him well. Pete and I will turn our attention to the games of the weekend when we continue on the College Game Day Podcast. Back on the College Game Day Podcast, Rece Davis and Pete Thamel. Huge weekend of games. Pete, let's start where we will be in Happy Valley, Oregon, and Penn State. Last week on College Game Day, we did a Venn diagram, 2 big circles, and we labeled the circles as tested and untested among some of the undefeated teams. I did get a kick out of on the X machine. Some people said, well, this team's undefeated and that team. It wasn't the intention to include all of them. So the intention was, here are some of them. Here are some who are tested. Here are some who are untested. And
I did get a text, Rece, from a certain head coach with an undefeated team that diagram was used as motivation for their team heading into the game last week. So good.
That's okay.
People are watching.
Do we have a connection with the athletic director with that particular head coach or not?
I know the athletic director. I don't think you know who this is. I don't think I shared it with you.
Okay, so I got the other one. We got it from the Terps, I think. So you must have gotten it.
Yeah, no. It was okay. a little higher class of preseason projection than the Terps.
Who was it? Come on.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that it was Jed Fish.
Well, good. Well, you know what?
I mean, they got plenty of time to prove it this weekend. That game's flying under the radar. Yeah,
I've spent because we're going to do the film room on that. I've spent a pretty significant amount of time looking at Washington tape and Ohio State versus scrambling quarterbacks. We'll get to that. But my point was in the Venn diagram that in the untested circle, we had both Oregon and Penn State. Now, we should have had another circle just for them. said really, 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 really untested. Because their opponents are 1-14 against FBS competition.
Whew.
Not a single team that either team has played has a winning record overall, regardless of whether we're talking FCS teams or whatever. None of them. Nobody has a winning record. Now, in Oregon's defense, Oregon has played 2 Power 4 opponents. And then they play their in-state rival, Oregon State, who used to be in the old Power 5. So it's not as if they've ducked anybody. And I'm not really even accusing Penn State of ducking anybody. They had a series canceled a few years ago with Virginia Tech that I think they were supposed to play, but they've had ample time to have found someone else to have tested themselves. But as I've looked at Penn State, watched their games coming in, Oregon's put the hammer down, gotten Dante Moore going and stuff. Penn State looks like an NFL team playing preseason games. Okay, we know we're going to win. We're good. Let's keep it vanilla. Let's make sure we're executing. Let's make sure we're seeing some stuff. Let's go. I'm expecting to see because you're untested, by the way, I'm not on here. I want to be clear because fans get very sensitive to these types of things. You can watch both of these teams play and tell that they're good. You also have the history of Penn State and a large number of its players that were really good last year. They're good. Yeah. They just haven't played anybody that's good yet. They're going to on Saturday. And I'm wondering if we see a really elevated version of Penn State at home, the wideout, and playing a team that they know if they don't play well, that can beat them, a team that did beat them in the Big Ten championship game last year.
Yeah, I feel better about the early body of work of Oregon than I do the early body of work of Penn State. Yeah. I don't think that's some outrageous take. Now, how much of Penn State is intentional vanilla? How much of it is we know what we have and we're going to hold it back and let it rip? And how much of it has just been a little bit of malaise, a little bit of feeling themselves out? By no means has Penn State been bad. But like you didn't walk away from any of their games overwhelmed or with anything popping. Now, to me, and we have a big feature running this week on .com on Drew Aller, and I spent a bunch of time there in June with he and the coaching staff at Penn State. And the takeaway was, Andy Kotelnicki said it. He said, "I think we can have the best offensive line in the country." All right, so Penn State's going to win this game on Saturday. They have to lean there and then work around that. Use the good young tight end, Luke Reynolds, use Khalil Dinkins, the veteran, and then get Singleton and Allen going, and then pick the spots with the receivers who will really find out if they have significantly upgraded or not on Saturday.
I think they have.
Okay.
I think they have. Not that they were bad last year. I think those two guys are really good.
Yes. So. And they needed that.
Right? Meaning Kyron Hudson and Trevor Pena, just to make sure we get names in there.
Yes, exactly. So James Franklin said to me, Drew Aller has played well when the people have played well around him. There was a sense, like a responsibility that they needed to elevate everything. For a few years under Franklin, it was the offensive line that was lagging and everything was behind. Now that receiver position has been kind of the bugaboo. So it's a fascinating inflection point, right, Rece? When you look at Franklin's record against top 10 teams, when you look at the almost decade now Big Ten title drought, when you look at they haven't had a quarterback drafted in the first round since 1995. Kerry Collins. So there's all these things like this is a generational moment for Penn State, and it all starts Saturday, right? Like it was the preseason. That's how they played it. That's what it was. Nothing. They stayed healthy. That's probably the best thing that's happened to them the first month of the season. But everything is now. If Penn State is going to traverse what I call in the story the most difficult terrain in sports, from great to elite, they've been a great program. Double-digit wins. They won 13 games last year. They won 2 playoff games. They were nose hair away from winning a third. But to go from great to elite is what they have to traverse, and that is hard, man. That is really, really hard. So it'll be fascinating because this is a young Duck team that almost like doesn't know what it doesn't know. And it's going to come in like Dan Lanning's going to come in loose. They're going to go on fourth down. They're going to play free, and it will be a fascinating contrast.
Does anyone in America throw the back shoulder fade better than Dante Moore?
Yeah,
I'm going to have Marissa Dowling, our researcher. We can break all this stuff down. Look at just back shoulder fades. Well, in watching him this week, there are some absolute dimes that he's thrown with conviction and velocity and accuracy. I mean, he's got the goods, which everybody knew coming out of high school, and then it served him well. After it got rocky at UCLA, to go and sit behind Dylan Gabriel last year, and now he's off to a great start. One of the themes of the season, though, has been new quarterbacks, big environments. Maybe some of them have struggled. It's not just Arch Manning either. There have been other instances. Bryce Underwood struggled. Played well enough for them to win on Saturday against Nebraska, but against Oklahoma, it was a struggle. A lot of that has to do with playing a really good team. Well, Dante Moore's playing a really good team Saturday night. So he a little bit older than those two guys I mentioned, but it has been a thing to keep an eye on thus far in the season.
Sure. It's almost like, Rece, quarterback development is difficult and it takes time and experience.
Almost. Who knew? I thought,
almost.
No, Pete, that can't be right. When you're a 5-star and you get these big NIL deals, you show up on campus ready-made, don't you?
You go
all of them
right to the Heisman. You go right to the Heisman.
Immediately.
Yeah. So spending some time with Aller and everybody around Penn State. The strength coach was really interesting there, Chuck Losey. Aller and Perbula came at the same time, and he said Aller was ready to play from a mental standpoint, from a football standpoint, but physically came from a small school, wasn't very developed. He wasn't ready. He said Perbula athletically was ready to play, and the other stuff he had time to work on. So he basically, the head strength coach, I thought this was interesting, Rece, works out the quarterbacks at Penn State. He says, "Hey, you're the tip of the spear of the program. I'm the strength coach. I'm going to do that." So he had fun kind of walking through those guys' developments. But Aller went from 20% body fat to 15. He went from running 16, 17 on the GPS to now he's over 20. Like, it just takes time sometimes to do this stuff. And Drew Aller was the number 2 rated pocket passer in ESPN's rankings. I think he was number 51 in the country. Like, he was one of these sort of gifted birth. And the part of the theme of the story is, it just takes some time sometimes. Like, you can't all of a sudden change your body fat by 5%. I wish you could, because I would do it. But
don't we all?
It just takes time. And Aller, reflecting back, said, I loved that I got to sit behind Sean Clifford. I watched, not only as a player and a person, he adores Clifford, but he said he just got to watch Sean Clifford handle being the quarterback at Penn State, how he did it, the expectations, the crush that comes after a loss, a tepid win, and how that looked. Like, he was very grateful that his arc was wait a year, take over, and then kind of go. So I credit Moore a lot for not running from UCLA to the next place he could start right away, for saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to go and develop. And credit Will Stein there. It started with Kenny Dillingham under Dan Lanning, and it's seamlessly shifted to Will Stein. They have gotten the quarterback ready to play every year at Oregon. The quarterback has been ready to play, ready to produce. And this was probably, going from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel, this was probably the biggest ambiguity at that position that Oregon has had. And so far, it's really looked crisp.
And they've used their weapons, even some weapons that you didn't expect. I think Jaden Lamar, Noah Whittington really have carried more of the load running than Mekhi Hughes, who I think when he came over from Tulane, that was sort of the expectation there. And they're still, putting up over 500 yards a game. Kenyon Sadiq, who we're going to have a story on game day Saturday. He had 2 touchdown catches against Penn State last year, another weapon that they can use. Fascinating matchup, big early season, not a be-all, end-all for either. But I think particularly important for Penn State, because if you start looking at Penn State's schedule, now they won't be eliminated from anything. I'm not saying that if Oregon goes in there and wins. But they've got a game at Ohio State, and really everything else on the schedule, they're pretty significant favorites in the game, I would think. They're at Iowa. They do have Indiana, but they've got him at home. They've got Nebraska, who's capable, but they're at home. So I think this is pretty big from a perception standpoint, whether Penn State is in position to take that step that you've talked about from being great to being elite. Another game where a quarterback has waited his turn and had moments on the road against Tennessee. Gunnar Stockton and Georgia against Alabama on Saturday night. Everybody understands this whole hex that Alabama has had on Georgia. They've won 9 of 10 meetings. Georgia won the national championship against them in 2021, and then promptly, turned around and lost an SEC championship to them a couple years later and got themselves knocked out of the playoff as a result. Gunnar Stockton had the great moments against Tennessee, but he can do something that hasn't been done since 2003. There haven't been many opportunities, but since 2003, and that's beat Alabama in Athens. They haven't been there very often. But this whole thing started in 2008 and Nick's first outstanding team at Alabama. Georgia had Matthew Stafford, Shawn Marino, A.J. Green, a great team. Blackout, black jerseys, black in the stands, blackout. And Scott Cochran, who's now the head coach at West Alabama, famously the Alabama strength coach, was caught on microphone during practice that week saying in that gravelly drawl that he has, black is what you wear to a certain adjective laced funeral. and then Alabama was up 31-0. It was over. And it was like, since that point, Georgia hasn't had a lot of luck. They're not doing the whole official blackout thing. The Spike Squad has called for blackout. It's almost as if they're bringing this full circle because even though Kirby Smart has struggled against Alabama, first time he's gotten them in Athens. First time.
Kirby Smart has never coached against Alabama in Athens.
That's correct.
That's wild to me. This is
most of these games have been in Atlanta. That's the thing.
Yes, of course.
They played there in 2015, which was Kirby was still the DC at Alabama, and they ripped them pretty good. So he's getting them in Athens. So all of this has been neutral site. This is a different thing. Alabama's struggles on the road under Kalen DeBoer. They're real, played, and they've embraced that. It's they've not embraced. They've acknowledged it.
Yeah.
If you heard them talk this week. So what do you are you looking at this as a crossroads game for Alabama, or more of a if not now when, Georgia, in terms of exercising the Alabama demon?
So I would say I'm more curious. Georgia showed me what they need to show me for this season in Knoxville last week. So as for the Alabama hex, like as these college football seasons go, like Georgia's on a path to the playoff, in my opinion, from what they've done and what they've shown. I had some questions about Stockton. We just hadn't seen him enough. He's answered those. The roster is good, and I think we've talked about this. The defense of Georgia is good. It is not elite. And I think Tennessee showed that. So I think I will be curious. Alabama has more offensive weapons than Tennessee. So I'll be curious how Georgia does. And if Alabama goes there and plays free, are they burdened by their early struggles, or do they go in tight, or do they go in with that sort of NAI bravado that Kalen DeBoer carried through his whole tenure at Fresno and Washington and let it rip? So I think how Alabama has recalibrated itself from the disaster in Tallahassee is going to be what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for here the most.
It's we like to say it. Multiple things can be true. It may be true that Florida State is really, really good. Maybe true that Florida State offensively was a bad matchup for Alabama, and I think Florida State is really good. And look, sort of the theme that we talked about, Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson was the least of Alabama's problems against Florida State, in my judgment. But I would think he would tell you he didn't play his best game. So, you'll be able to find out on Saturday night what kind of step he's taken. And, someone asked me this yesterday on a radio show, and I'll put it this way, because I think one of the things people, when they start looking at the number of losses in the loss column, is this a must win for Alabama? The answer is no, it's not a must win for Alabama. But you know what it is from a perception standpoint? It is a must compete until the final whistle and at least have a chance to win. And I don't mean final drive chance to win. I mean competing until the final whistle of the game and a chance and being in the game throughout. That's what it is, a must for Alabama. Otherwise, it's not, and it's not even a must win for Georgia. It will be a punch in the gut to Georgia if it doesn't win at home, but it's not a must win. I mean, there's a lot of ball in front of them. They've got a lot of games at home. Georgia needs it because you need to win every game, but this is not an elimination game for either. Certainly closer for Alabama, but it'll still just be one conference loss. But I think the big storyline to me from Alabama is it's a must-compete game. Yeah. Must compete and be in the game until the end, because there's no shame to losing to a great team like Georgia. And if Alabama can play well enough to win that game, certainly there will be no shame for Georgia in losing that game. And I think the same type of thinking would apply to LSU and Ole Miss with this slight change. We're going to find out if Ole Miss is real, because I believe LSU is. LSU's defense has been tremendous. I think Nussmeier, he gets healthier in the offense, and the offensive line gets a little more maturity to it, and a little more tread on the tires, or tread worn off the tires from usage. The offensive line will get better. But what we're going to find out with LSU and Ole Miss, in addition to this being a huge conference game, what about the budding family feud inside there? Now, all of a sudden, the week of the game, Lane Kiffin's daughter is dating Whit Weeks, and this is when you give us the hard launch, as the kids say, Pete?
There is clearly a linear genetic line from Lane Kiffin to Landry Kiffin on the ability to draw attention. That is, there is a clear affinity there for the Kiffin crew. And doing that. And quite frankly, Rece, that is why college football is great. It is so utterly preposterous. Again, if somebody had written the script of the daughter of the famous lightning rod head coach dating the star linebacker of the opponent and would reveal it on, whatever it was, Monday of game week, people would be like, no way. There's no way that could happen in real life. That's not real life. Nope. And then Lane Kiffin commented on one of the photos.
It's like an episode of Friday Night Lights.
Yes, it is. It is really something else. So thank you, Kiffins, for all your content. They should spell Kiffin with a C for content, because that is unbelievable. When I did a quadruple take when I first saw that, I was like, wow. So that is clearly something.
In the YouTube version, the extended play version of the College Game Day podcast, Ryan McGee is going to join us. He's going to talk a little bit about the E60 feature, which you can see an extended play version on the ESPN app, I believe. The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin, I believe it's called. And it'll be a much better life, Pete, if we can briefly just hit the game. If he can get a win over LSU, what's going to be the situation at quarterback with Austin Simmons, Trinidad Chambliss?
So we're here on Wednesday morning right now. I've been told Simmons is trending towards playing and being able to contribute. He was basically the emergency guy for 2 weeks. How he is, if he'll start, I think we're going to learn that Wednesday, Thursday, later in the week. There's still some time left to kind of figure that out. And it'll be fascinating, right? Because Chambliss is an excellent dual threat quarterback. But I think if you're going to pick apart a defense like LSU's, you're going to need someone who can drop back and really spin it. And Chambliss hasn't quite shown that level yet. So Lane Kiffin said early in the week that a healthy Austin Simmons is 100% the starting quarterback. I think with an ankle, it's hard to project him to be 100%, right? He's going to be a recovering, he's going to still be recovering there. So early signs were optimistic, and we'll see how things respond as the days go on. Don't be surprised if we see them both, right?
Yeah, I will defer to Lane Kiffin on choosing his quarterback. Austin Simmons is a high-level talent. He's thrown 4 picks. Yeah. He's thrown 4 picks already. And Trinidad Chambliss just went 300, 100. So I understand there's no quarterback controversy. But absent reputation and NIL money, there might be. At the very least, there would be quarterback competition. I understand they're different style players. I understand that Simmons' ceiling, when you talk about prospect NFL, is probably much greater. And he's a highly talented prospect. And also has played well. I've been impressed. He's bounced back from the interceptions against Kentucky, through a couple bad ones, and then, played well. But Chambliss has been really good, really, really good. So I think your instinct is right. I think you're probably going to see both of them. A lot of great games this weekend. Those are the headliners. back to wrap up the television edition of the College Game Day Podcast right after this. Notre Dame and Arkansas play at noon 11 Arkansas time in Fayetteville. The Fighting Irish and the Razorbacks, the two unluckiest teams in America. Arkansas is two sort of inexplicable fumbles away from being undefeated. They were driving down to beat Ole Miss. They were going to win that game. They were driving down to beat Memphis. They were going to win that game. Lost in both. Notre Dame has lost two games on essentially the last play of the game. One of them was literally the last play against Miami, who some people have ranked number one in the country. And the other one was on a last gasp fourth down pass against Texas A&M with 13 seconds left. Notre Dame's lost two. Now, we've talked about how some of these games, Penn State, Oregon, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss, are not elimination games. This is an elimination game for Notre Dame. If Notre Dame loses to Arkansas, they're done in terms of college football playoff consideration, in my judgment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They need to get rolling and really run the table, right? Like the wins available for Notre Dame are not big enough for them to go in as a 3-loss team in my judgment right now. Again, there's a lot of variables there that can change, but
SC may be a big maybe a big win,
maybe, but that's their only win, and they have two losses. And look, you lose your first two games perception wise. It's just a long way to go to get back in. So again, maybe Navy becomes a bigger game than it is right now on paper as they go on and win. But right now, yeah, Notre Dame needs to win, and this is a generational game for Arkansas. Like they're going to go into a cauldron. I'm sure Hog fans are annoyed that the game is at 11 o'clock local, right? Because it's a once a decade kind of moment in Fayetteville to have Notre Dame coming in, and I think this is going to be a close game. I think Notre Dame probably pulls away, but this will not be a blowout by any means. And Talon Green is a fascinating guy to go against when your defense is a little bit sideways, and Notre Dame's trying to get that back in. I remember Marcus Freeman said this week he's not going to take over play calling because he doesn't think the play calling is the issue. But clearly their defense has dipped since Al Golden got there, and Talon Green's a tough guy to get right against.
Yeah, Chris Ash taking over for Al Golden after Golden went to the NFL after doing such a great job a year ago. And Marcus said that there was a meeting among the defensive staff members and everybody pulling the same direction, or they were going to separate. If they separated, that's not good for anybody. So it's a crossroads game for Notre Dame for sure. We expect that Marcus Freeman will join us live on College Game Day Saturday morning, leading up to kickoff between the Fighting Irish and the Razorbacks. And, we talk a lot about venues and where we wind up on the podcast and where the Game Day television show winds up. A few years ago, we wound up at Appalachian State. And the reason for that was, Appalachian State was not at all on the radar for that September Saturday. But the previous week, Appalachian State upset Texas A&M. We had been planning to go to Texas A&M that week, and then it became the right place to be for the show, to be at App State. Shawn Clark was the coach of the Mountaineers at that time. He'd been working as the offensive line coach at UCF. And Pete, tragically, Shawn Clark passed away, and it's something that has impacted a lot of people.
Yeah, Rece, I can't overstate the outpouring within the college football coaching industry for Shawn Clark. He passed away at age 50, left behind his wife and two children, and he's a guy who just people gravitated to, and the college football world is heartbroken for the loss of Shawn Clark this week. I've been told that there's likely going to be a GoFundMe to help out his family coming in the future, but all-time great player at App State on some of Jerry Moore's great teams, was coached there for a long time, left an indelible legacy at that school, and really left the highest compliment you can give someone is they left an impression as a great human on a lot of people. So rest in peace, Shawn Clark. Prayers with his family, Rece.
Our condolences and deepest sympathies to Shawn's family. Certainly thank him for what he brought to college football, and we're certainly extending our prayers and condolences to everyone feeling the loss of Shawn Clark. College Game Day Podcast will continue on YouTube. We'll talk to many lives of Lane Kiffin, also make a few picks along the way. It's a great Saturday of college football coming up. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching the College Game Day Podcast. College Game Day Podcast rolls on YouTube. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel, pleased to be joined by our good friend Ryan McGee, who is right in the center and a driving force in the many lives of Lane Kiffin, which debuts on Wednesday night. You'll be able to see it on the app. Lane Kiffin, one of the most fascinating characters in all of sports, let alone college football, for the various things that have happened from tarmac to Tennessee to Ole Miss to flirtations otherwhere. And on the subject of flirtations, Ryan.
Yeah.
How big a deal in the many lives of Lane Kiffin, or was it already past edit before Lane's daughter Landry reveals this East Dillon, West Dillon type romance with Whit Weeks, the star linebacker of LSU, who, look, I know most of our people are loyal, hardcore college football people, but if you grew up in the South, you realize that Ole Miss and LSU hate every wretched breath the other side sucks into their greedy lungs. You realize that at the end of the national anthem, even if Ole Miss is playing Poughkeepsie State, at the end of the national anthem, the Rebel faithful yell, "Go to hell, LSU." They don't like each other. And now here before this huge game, undefeated team, here we come with a Kiffin, Weeks, romance, Ole Miss, LSU, Romeo and Juliet, you name it. All of the star-crossed romances. As a writer, where do we stand on that, Ryan?
Yeah, it's SEC West side story, right? That's what I told my wife last night. Yeah. But no, I will say this: film was in the can, like over the weekend, and we pushed it over the finish line. And airs on Wednesday night. We had to have that done. All this dropped, 2 days later. But I appreciate the publicity. I told Lane that. And also, Landry is a huge part of this documentary. In fact, people have asked, we interviewed so many people for the film, and everyone has asked, what was your favorite interview? Obviously, the answer is Lane, because he's the backbone of the piece. But Landry is the second best interview in the thing, because she was so honest. And I've told Ole Miss fans this. It's funny. I've been telling Ole Miss fans this all fall, that they need to give that girl a hug, because she's the reason he's not at Auburn. And now they're all mad at me. I don't want to talk to her, because they're like, okay, I get it. She's dating a guy from LSU, but she's very Knox and Landry both. Knox is the son who now has moved to Oxford to go to high school, just like Landry did. And they're both very honest about Lane wasn't around, and Dad was, at Alabama, and Dad was at FAU, and Dad was at Oxford, and they were back in Manhattan Beach, growing up, and they really didn't see him very much. And now he's working so hard to fix that. And Landry was great. Her interview was so amazing. I left the interview. I told our crew, I go, whatever that woman wants to do in her life, she's going to do it, because she's amazing. Mm-hmm. And that includes dating someone from the enemy, clearly.
So this is fascinating to me. I remember the Kiffin Auburn flirtation. Do you go into detail in the doc about, like, was there like an inflection point where Landry was like, "Dad, you're not going"? Like, walk us through a little bit of that, because that's you're talking about that as the SEC West turns.
Yeah. So she moved to Oxford for her senior year of high school. With the goal of attending Ole Miss, because she had visited Dad, and you guys know, once you get to Oxford, I remember calling my wife when we were at Oxford, my daughter can never see this, because she'll move to Mississippi. Like it's the perfect college town. She wanted to go to Ole Miss, so she moved there for her senior year, and it was just Lane and Landry living in the house, and they were getting reacquainted. And then it was the middle of that fall. I think it was after that Wild Arkansas game, that all of a sudden, we're all reporting that he's talking to Auburn. She finds out about this, and she basically went to him and said, "I moved here to be with you. Are you really going to leave?" And she and her friends actually put together a slideshow presentation of all these great moments they had with Lane, and set it to like a song they knew that would make him cry. And they ambushed him in his office and showed it to him. And he admits, and she proudly says, that's the main reason that he stopped, all communication with maybe taking that job.
It's he's such a fascinating character, because he is unfiltered and honest, Ryan, about things that haven't gone his way. He can poke fun at himself. He, he confronts those who have confronted him. The segments with Paul Feinbaum are gold.
Yeah.
When they get on there and start talking about not liking one another and all of that kind of thing. And you got me fired and you called me the Miley Cyrus of college football. A lot of coaches and a lot of people would just simply hold a grudge about that forever. And I'm not ever talking to that guy. He disrespected me or whatever. And you can understand that feeling. That's a normal human emotion. Yet Lane, we talk about Lane's growth, or people talk about Lane's growth, and it seems to be real. And this seems to be a tremendous example of it. Does that then lead us? I would never say a coach is settled in for good, but when you also consider, his son is still there now. I think he is back together with Lane Kiffin. I think that's right. It seems to be anyway, if you can, judge from social media posts. Is he finally settled in? Has he found his spot?
I think so. I genuinely do. And I always, with Lane, you always, or with any of these guys, you kind of,
sure,
you believe them to a point. But I left. So the kind of the backbone interview for the documentary was done. We did 3 interviews over a couple of days. And what he keeps saying is, and he said it to others too, which is, I needed Oxford more than Oxford needed me. I wrote a story for ESPN.com today, kind of leading into the documentary, and it's about what you're talking about, which is this growth. He's 50 years old. He hasn't had a drink in 5 years. By the way, who moves to Oxford and stops drinking? No one, right? I had one birthday in Oxford, and Marty Smith kept me there, and I almost ended up in rehab by the end of the day. So how do you do that? But he's lost like 50 pounds. He's doing the hot yoga with his brother Chris every morning, which is, Monty used to love a good sweat, in the sauna. So that it's kind of an extension of that. But I believe him when he says it. And you're right. Knox has moved to town. Chris is now on his staff, his little brother, and they basically share a backyard. In fact, Chris lives in the house that Lane used to live in. And Landry is a junior at Ole Miss. And yeah, Layla has a place like in town on the square. And so with the exception of the middle daughter who's playing volleyball at USC, everyone's back together again for the first time since the kids were little. And he's so happy. And he talks about this in the doc, when he first went to Oxford, I think he viewed it the same way all the rest of us did, which is this is a bridge job. He's going to do whatever he can do while he's there. But the pace of Oxford, he was worried about, like it was going to be too slow. And now what he realizes is that slow pace is what gave him the bandwidth to look at himself and to work on himself. And, both of his parents have passed away, in basically a year apart. Summer of 24 was Monty, and the summer of 25 with his mother. And they had these years together in Oxford. I mean, Monty's office was right next to Lane while he was suffering from dementia. And so Lane kept saying, I quit drinking because I want to be my best person for my parents. And what he knew was going to be their last years. That's not the Lane Kiffin that we all knew. Now, there's enough in there. I mean, the response of take the over to Trey Wallace's post about the dating thing was perfect. That's Lane. But now he picks his spots as opposed to, I think, not so long ago, he's just laying in the bed just tweeting like crazy. And so, yeah, I believe him when he says he's happy. And I think if Ole Miss if they continue to commit to the program financially like they have been, because whatever they're doing is working. Right. And so as long as that continues, I think he's going to stay there for a while. Now, of course, now that I've said all that, we'll be here talking about him taking the Florida job in January.
Well, I think what's the change you've described, Brian, makes him a lot more hireable for these, championship level jobs, right? Like Ole Miss is a good job. And I give the Ole Miss administration boatloads of credit. They were right at the forefront of NIL, quite frankly, ahead of LSU, ahead of a lot of teams in the SEC. And they said, we are going to spend. We are going to be competitive. We are going to pay Lane Kiffin. Every time some school sniffs Lane Kiffin, they run and give him a raise, right? Like, so they know they have an asset and they are spending to accentuate that asset. But I do think it's interesting. As he has evolved, maybe we'll use the hot yoga analogy, he has sweated out some of his reputational toxicity, right? Yeah. And that may make him a little bit. 7 years ago, Lane Kiffin was too there was too much variance in behavior for him to go to a high-end job. And do you feel like, you know, the SEC better than anyone, right? Do you feel like that has changed reputationally?
Oh, there's no question about it. And you even know it, like, you know, they got the infamous group chat, right, of all the SEC coaches. And then there's the separate branches of all that. I mean, I was just out at Oregon, and one of my favorite responses ever was, I remember I was doing a story for .com, ESPN.com, about, all right, who's the face of college football now that Nick Saban, you know, is you know, with you guys on the weekends. And Dan Lanning was like, well, it has to be Lane, because number one, he's smarter than people realize, and number two, just for entertainment purposes. But even talking to Dan about it, he said that's kind of changed a little bit in the last couple of years. So there's no question he's more attractive now to a school, to a, you know, high and mighty school, high society school that might not have wanted to roll the dice on him, because I don't think it's a roll of the dice anymore. The problem now is, going back to Rece's point, I don't know that he wants to leave. I certainly don't think that he wants to leave as long as Landry is hanging out in his office all day, which he does, works out at the building and with a backpack and hangs out with him. And now that Knox is going to be playing high school football right around the corner, it's
is Knox good? I've heard he's good.
Yeah, but there's a work-life balance that he and I've talked about a lot. And the three of us know about this, about struggling with, all right, you know, what's important to you, and why do you go get on that flight and go home in the middle of the night? Because you want to get back to your family, because you want them to know that you're there. That's kind of where he is. And he's finally found that balance. So do you want to knock that? What's more important to you, right? And so I think the tests are coming, because I think there's going to be, maybe not even this year, but certainly over the next couple of years, there's going to be a couple of jobs that will fit that I wouldn't leave Tennessee for any job other than USC description, right? Only a couple of those. And they might be open. And so we'll see.
Is Knox a good player? Sorry, I'm curious. I've heard he's a quarterback, right, at Oxford?
Yeah, I tell you what's striking about Knox is, because we all see him at SEC Media Days every year. Mm-hmm. He grew 7 inches since last year. I mean, He's a man. Like, he, you know, and he's still, it's funny, his mannerisms and all are still the Knox that we all knew when he was 8 years old. But I'm told by our spies down there, I'm talking about the Cutcliffe family, that he's got the potential to be really, really good.
Okay, I've kind of heard that too. So.
Yep.
Well, I've seen some video, just little clips, you know, of like him when Knox is at various camps. It looks as if he can spin it, and if Cutcliffe gives him an endorsement, ultimately, that's a guy who knows quarterbacks. We're going to see some good quarterback play in that game, whether it's Austin Simmons, Trinidad Chambliss, certainly from Garrett Nussmeier. As we move into making some picks, a 6-pack of picks, Ryan, we're going to let you get in on the fun here too with this, if you'd like. Let's start with LSU and Ole Miss, 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. Bayou Bengals with a couple of high-profile wins that all of a sudden have lost a little luster because of the way Clemson and Florida have played. I don't think anyone will be able to take the shine off this one if they were to go into Oxford and win the game. Wild game a year ago, a history of wild games. Pete, lead us off. Which way are you leaning here, LSU or Ole Miss?
I'm leaning LSU. I just think the class of talent at Ole Miss is not what it was last year, and I think this is the game that starts the show. So I say the Tigers go in and roll.
Ryan?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Are you going to stick with the documentary, or are you going to go with BK and the Bayou Bengals?
Well, Ole Miss is ahead of schedule. I think we can all agree on that. No matter who's in quarterback, I didn't think this team would look as good as it has in putting up points. My problem is I keep waiting on LSU to step on their own tail, because they're going to do it at some point. They didn't do it week one like we were used to, but now we know that the team they beat wasn't as good as we thought. I think Ole Miss could pull it off at home. So yes, in the name of promoting E60, the many lives of Lane Kiffin, I'm hotty toddy.
All right. One thing, and I meant to say this, I'm going to say this about Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin's potential future and how long it's going to be in Oxford, maybe for a really, really long time. If last year proved nothing else, it's that you can win the national championship at Ole Miss. And you say, well, what are you talking about, Rece Davis? You're crazy. Ole Miss didn't even make the playoff. They should have. And they certainly had a team that was capable of beating anyone, including the team who won it. So you can win it all at Ole Miss. There might be a higher profile in this era. Now, 15 years ago, I would not have said that. It's a different world in college football now. That might keep Lane Kiffin there long term. I hate everything about what I'm about to say because I do not like picking against Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss at home in this type of game. But I'm going to. I'm a believer in LSU. LSU has not played to its potential offensively yet. How much of that is attributable to Garrett Nussmeier's core injury that apparently is getting better? We'll see. I'm going to take LSU. I moved them out of the top spot of my AP poll this week, largely because I moved them all the way down to 3, and this shows you my regard for all 3 of these teams. Logic would have dictated, because I felt like Miami had earned its way to the top, that you just slide everybody down. I couldn't stomach moving Ohio State below 2. So LSU was the one who lost out. If LSU wins this game, maybe they go back to the top. At any rate, certainly they will prove that they will be a force to be reckoned with in terms of the national championship picture for the rest of the season. Lane is not getting a night game at home against LSU. He said this week that he told Greg Sankey, okay, I get it. When we play them here, it's a day game. We play them there, it's a night game. Got it. Moving on. And it's because the night game in the SEC, the headliner, is Alabama and Georgia. 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. Ryan, I'll give you first swing at this one. Everyone knows the vexing at the hands of the Tide that Georgia has suffered. What happens Saturday night?
And I'll be there. We're going to do Marty McGee and SEC Nation there on Saturday morning. It is something's got to give is what this game is. I think Georgia's won 33 games in a row at home. But we all know about their struggles against Alabama, their mental block against Alabama, which was never on greater display than it was at Alabama a year ago, because Georgia should have put that game away. I remember sitting and watching that one. And it was one of those where my dad would always say, they need to finish this now. They need to finish this now. They need to don't let them hang around. Don't let them hang around. And they did and lost that game. But the simple fact of the matter is I love Kalen DeBoer. I like talking to Kalen DeBoer. I want Kalen DeBoer to succeed in Tuscaloosa at this point, just so everyone has to go back and delete their tweets. When a guy was burned in Twitter effigy, and then everybody has to eat crow later. But he can't win on the road. Until his teams prove to me they can win any game on the road, let alone going in between the hedges. So yeah, I think this is Georgia, and it might not be that close.
Ooh, that's interesting. I think it is close, but I think Georgia wins. I think it's low scoring, and I think it's going to end up kind of being a good old fashioned slog. 2 talented teams. I'm going to take Georgia like I think like a 20-13 kind of game.
I think it's going to be a great game, and Kalen DeBoer has not won on the road at Alabama. He's won at Oregon. He's won in front of a pro-Texas crowd in the Sugar Bowl against Texas. I think Alabama plays great.
All right.
I think Alabama plays well enough to win, but doesn't. I'm going to take Georgia to win the game, but I think most of the questions about Alabama will be erased, and all of the questions you have about Gunnar Stockton, if you have any left after the Tennessee game, will be erased at the end of this game. So I'll make it a clean sweep. I'll go Georgia, but I think that there will be moments that whether the Spike Squad is dressed in black or dressed in red, whatever, that they will be very, very nervous, because I'm just going to say it. I think Ty Simpson's good, and I know Jeremy Bernard's good, and Ryan Williams and Isaiah Horton, they've got some weapons, and having Tim Keene and Jam Miller back, this is going to be a great game. Georgia wins. Alabama plays great, which is probably as important as anything for the Tide. Where we will be, College Game Day Saturday morning, Oregon and Penn State. That's a night game. It's the traditional whiteout, a clash of top 6 opponents who have not been tested this year. I've said this several times on the pod, Pete, that neither of these teams have been tested. I went over the records of their opponents. It's abysmal. But if you watch them both play, you know they're both good. And this is a really important game. James Franklin has struggled in games like this, whether at home, away, or even in the postseason, though they won a couple of postseason games last year. What happened Saturday night in Happy Valley?
Well, I picked Penn State to win the national title. They were my number one team going in, and I just don't think we know a thing about them yet. Like this version of who they are. They have been perfectly functional so far, and that's you. At this point in the season, you want to vibe on a team, and I just don't have a vibe on Penn State. I don't want to say they've underwhelmed or underperformed. They've been fine.
NFL preseason.
Yes, no, NFL preseason is exactly
right.
that's exactly what it is. So, if everything's going to change at Penn State, we need to see an edge. We need to see some swashbuckling, freewheeling, like energy from that program that maybe we haven't seen in some of these big games. But I think we see it in the whiteout, and I think some of Oregon's inexperience gets exposed deep in the night in Happy Valley.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Oregon has a lot of potential. Oregon feels like a team that is building toward what they're going to look like in November. Because you're right, the inexperience to me is the part that I kind of can't get past. And the whiteout is real. For anyone who hasn't experienced it, it's hard to you can't overstate it. Like it's a real thing. And so, yeah, I'm with that. And I think that James Franklin, who I like very much, started getting over that can't win the game hump a year ago. And now I think this is the next step on that climb. So, yeah, I got Penn State and the whiteout at home, and I'm very jealous you guys are going to get to be there for that.
I've got Penn State winning the game as well, which makes me nervous anytime, on game day in the morning.
Save the graphic.
Try to save the graphic
right
at the end. People use it for motivation. I won't be surprised at all if Oregon wins the game. I think Oregon will make some explosive plays against the Penn State defense. I actually believe in Penn State's receivers. What I need to see Saturday night and what I'm banking on, the two things that will turn this game. Can Penn State run the ball, which they did extraordinarily well against Oregon last year. They had a lot of big plays. Both Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton had long runs. Even Drew Aller had a 22-yard run. They had explosive running plays. They averaged almost 9 yards per carry against Oregon's defense last year. They'll need to do that, and Aller is going to have to avoid the catastrophic "why did you do that" mistake. If he does that, and if they can run the ball, Penn State will win. I think that they're going to. I think Oregon is going to prove itself to be a contender as well. I expect that to be a very close game as well that will swing on a play or two. But I'm going to go with Penn State to win. Saturday afternoon in the Big Ten, Curt Cignetti takes his juggernaut Hoosiers on the road into Iowa. Now, Iowa hasn't played offensively the way we thought maybe Mark Gronowski would be able to elevate them when he came over from South Dakota State. But this is a tricky game because of this. When you play as perfectly as Indiana did last Saturday night against Illinois, it is really hard to follow that up and do it again. Now, maybe they won't have to. I would advise strongly against kicking the ball in any way, shape, form, or fashion to Caden Weechin because he can score immediately. I imagine Cignetti's way ahead of me on that one. Indiana, keep it rolling, Ryan?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. We all do all these radio interviews and to all of our ESPN affiliates and with podcasts and whatever else. And no one asked me a single question about Indiana from February until about, let's say, last Wednesday. And now every interview I've done, the last couple of days, they want to talk about Indiana. Are they for real? Can they win it? I'm like, I don't know what else they need to do for you. Iowa always has one win in them somewhere in this calendar that we didn't expect. And so I'm always wary of picking against them in these types of games. But it's hard for me to think of a team that I continue to pick against, and all they do is keep winning ball games. It's almost as if the head coach continues to tell us that we should believe in them, which he does a lot. So, yeah, I believe I'm going to go with the Hoosiers too. I don't think you can put together two perfect games in a row because Illinois is good. I mean, I just saw them on January 1st, and I was like, these guys are loaded for to go for a while. But I don't know if you can put together two perfect games like that. But I think right now Indiana believes, and I think that's the pick.
Yeah, I will take the trip to the chiropractor here and pat myself on the back because I did pick Indiana to go to the playoff, and it was rooted in a very simple concept. Kurt Signetti and Mike Shanahan, through the last 5-7 years, have basically had the best quarterback in their league. Either the player of the year or the most productive guy in Rourke last year. I think Rourke might have led him in QBR. He wasn't the best statistical quarterback in the Big Ten, but he was right there. They simply know how to engineer offense. And I'm a huge Fernando Mendoza fan. Loved him at Cal last year. Loved the fit there. They were very bullish on him in the offseason. And do I think they're going to go to Iowa and score 63 points? No, I don't. Do I think they will win? Yes. And do I think that offense can find ways to find some cracks in Phil Parker's defense? Phil Parker's the best defensive coordinator in college football the last decade. I don't even think it's close. If you look at the numbers, you look at the consistency of performance. But there's no earthly way I could pick against Indiana right now. So I think they win by 2 touchdowns.
I think Indiana wins it easily by beating Iowa standards. I concur with everything that you guys have said. They won't be able to duplicate that performance because that was a once in a season type performance where you do everything nearly perfectly. I mean, Mendoza threw 2 incomplete passes. That's absurd. He's been great. Their receivers are outstanding. Iowa is top 15 total defense. They don't have enough offense. As long as they just don't punt or kick the ball to Weechin, Iowa has proven to have trouble scoring. And if you watch the Rutgers game the other night, Rutgers probably should have beaten Iowa, and Rutgers certainly found some holes in the Iowa pass defense. And I imagine that Mendoza and company will exploit those. Indiana gets a road win at Iowa. And by the way, Indiana, for all of the talk about its schedule a year ago, Indiana's schedule, this is a tough game because it's hard to play at Iowa. They have an off week, and then they go to Oregon on the 11th. So that'll be a fascinating game, and they have to go to Penn State. So we'll find out if the Hoosiers have elevated yet another step and who's going to bet against them at this point. I'll take Indiana to win that game on the road. USC and Illinois, that's the old body clock game for the Trojans. It'll be 9 a.m. local time, and it's a gut check game for Illinois after the game that we just finished discussing. USC and Illinois, very disappointing performance for the Illini. Their secondary was decimated by injury and targeting call, which I still don't like. But the Trojans have been sort of quietly off to a solid start. Jaden Mayava's been terrific for them. Pete, how do you see this one?
Boy, it strains credulity to watch what happened to Illinois, especially with the injuries they've had in the secondary, and think like, oh, they'll just turn it around next week. Now, I think this is a much more fascinating test for USC because like their Big Ten medal they failed last year. They failed against Minnesota. They failed against Maryland. USC did not show they could compete in the trenches in the Big Ten. And this is their first real test of that. Now, that said, I just have a hard time seeing what these eyes saw against Indiana and then being like, oh, they'll turn it around and push USC around and win the game. I think there's enough flaws in that Illinois secondary. Xavier Scott, their best DB, is out for the season, where I think USC goes in and figures out a way to have breakfast and champagne.
Yeah, it's first of all, shout out to a classic traditional Big Ten matchup. I mean, it's I'm still struggling with this, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's funny because we were talking about Oregon, Penn State, and there's a part of me that's like, man, props to them for scheduling this game. And it's gonna take me a minute. This is coming from a guy who grew up in Tobacco Road that still sees Maryland on the ticker and goes, why is Maryland playing Rutgers? But anyway, but the reality is that I think that Illinois is hurt physically and Illinois is hurt mentally. And I think all the 9 a.m. stuff and all that stuff, I think it absolutely factors. But the reality is I've not watched USC a ton this year, but it just feels like it feels like a USC win to me. And I'm also looking at the mysteriously and magically accurate ESPN FPI analytics matchup predictor, the Ouija board of college football. and they've got USC at 72.9% right now, which surprises me that the number's that big. But it also makes me feel better about picking them.
I'm gonna go USC, and if we'd made this pick 2 weeks ago, I would have picked Illinois for sure.
100%.
It is really hard to rebound from a humiliation like the one they had. Now, I expect Bielema's teams will fight back. He's been around the block. This is not some novice head coach that doesn't know how to pull a team together and to flush a bad game. But that's a confidence shaking type of game. They couldn't do anything. Bielema said he'd never been part of anything like it. I think SC is on the rise, but I would caution this. If you watch the Purdue game and you want to give props to Purdue's improvement and all of that, wasn't always clean, wasn't always, pretty. Maybe it's to travel this way. Maybe it's a stadium. Maybe they didn't, weren't on the edge of their hyped up nature for Purdue. I don't know. I'd be careful with the early start there and a desperate Illinois team, but I don't have the guts after watching Illinois and what happened to them to say, just to echo Pete's words, I agree with it. It's hard to say they're just going to bounce back. If they had lost, a normal game, lost by a couple of touchdowns, maybe you say, okay, you know what? They're going to dig in and bounce back. But now, it's kind of human nature to question, are we good? We thought we were good. We should be good. Are we good? Guess we'll find out. This feels like one of those games that everybody in the world's going to pick USC, and I should zag when everybody's zigging and take Illinois, but I can't do it. So I'm going to go SC and offer this. Whether you think SC is good or not, you're going to know soon. They've got Michigan on the 11th. They're at Notre Dame. They're at Nebraska. And then they're at Oregon late in the season. The trip to Notre Dame, and even with Nebraska's shortcomings in certain areas, that'll be a difficult game come November. So we'll find out a little bit more about them. Pete, I'll let you choose if you have something. I have a couple of candidates for our deep cut game. We can go obvious, which might not be bad with the two unluckiest teams in America. You can go to Notre Dame, Arkansas.
Let's go deeper than that.
Or
Notre Dame should never be a deep cut, right? Like that's...
What do you think? That was why I brought it up. I also had, again, it's not deep, but deep within the ACC, another traditional ACC matchup between Cal and Boston College, coming off of what happened to Songa Polatele against San Diego State. Do you have a better candidate? How about New Mexico State, New Mexico? Do you like either of those?
I have a little bit of a fun one. Let's do fun. If you hate the forward pass, I have the game for you.
Oh,
Rice goes to Navy.
Oh yeah,
and Rice.
Now wait a minute. Now Drew Cronick with Navy, they'll pitch that pill around a little bit more than they used to.
They will.
You don't have to hate the forward pass.
Yes, if you have, if you generally dislike the forward pass, not hate it, but if you generally dislike it, Drew Cronick has brought some of the forward pass in there. But I think if we go look at the NCAA statistics, we will, and we look at individual. No, we want team. Let's see here. Where is team rushing? I'm zigging.
Well, rush offense. Navy leads the nation rushing offense, 375 yards.
And where's Rice?
That is to be expected.
Where's
right?
Rice?
Okay. Let's see. Rice is rushing offense. Rice is 15th.
They are 15th.
246 yards.
Okay. So when you look at this game, Rice is 3-1 for the first time, I believe, since the 60s. So credit to Scott Abel and the gun choice offense. His offenses at Davidson led the nation in rushing, I believe, 6 of the last 7 years. So he really likes to run the ball, and he has brought that offense there, and it's worked. He's one of these guys, fascinating story, Rece, who basically won at bad high schools and won state titles, went to bad colleges and ran good offenses. And by bad, I mean places that don't win traditionally. Davidson, McGee, from your North Carolina ties, not a traditional winner in football, correct?
Yeah. They don't even, people that live in Davidson don't even know they play football, but they do.
Correct.
I've covered.
Yes, he's one of these coaches. We get one of these guys every 5 years who just rises up simply because he's kind of figured it out, and he has done an excellent job at Rice so far. I don't think they will go to Navy and win, but I do think the game will end in under 3 hours.
So you're picking
I'm going to take Navy. I'm going to take Navy. But
okay,
it's fascinating. Right. Just kind of the beauty of college football. McGee has the great saying, Saturday football. is this game, right? This is not a Sunday football game. This is a quintessential Saturday football game.
Yeah, Davidson football. I wrote a story.
McGee,
I wrote a story about them a few years ago. They scored 70-something points in a regulation game, and they barely threw it. Not a lot of defense in that game.
Yeah.
You taking Rice or Navy, Ryan? You can make it quick.
Yeah, no. I don't pick against the academies. Give me Navy, and although they do is disappoint me. But yeah, I'm anchors away, boys.
I read up on this gun choice offense because I was convinced that I had the super dog to end all super dogs a couple of weeks ago in the Bayou Bucket game, Rice in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Now I knew Willie Fritz, familiar with option offense, and so there was certainly that thorn in the side. But I thought, well, there's no way that my partners on the desk even know these teams are playing. And how I do super dog, I'll give you a little inside baseball. There is nothing about that segment that I dislike more than when we have guys take the same game. I can't stand it. I wish it'd be first come, first serve, because the whole purpose of this, we're all competitive. I mean, I talk about it way too much. It's all in fun. We're all competitive. Of course we want to be right. I mean, it's right there in that bio thing they have us do on X, the great quote from the legendary concierge of crime, Raymond Reddington from the Blacklist. I never tire of being correct. I enjoy being correct. But the purpose of the Superdog segment is to touch some other games that we haven't spent a lot of time on and to maybe shine a little light on something that's been off the radar, right? So I'm thinking there's no way anybody picks a Rice-Houston game. I'm going with Rice. I'm going to give Scott Abel a little props, mention the leading rushing. But I always go last so that I don't duplicate games. Desmond Howard picked Rice. I told Desmond, I said, you've got a stone cold lock winner. You're going to win a Superdog this week. He did not. Houston was able to take care of the gun choice offense, and it was a great pick in my judgment. Didn't work out for Desmond. I'm taking Navy. I mean, these are two guys with creative offenses. I met Chronic in your neck of the woods years ago, McGee, when I was speaking at that Hickory Sportsman's Club in North Carolina, hometown of Rick Barnes, I believe. Yeah. They have a great event there, and Drew was coaching at Lenore Rhine and came over and been a big fan of his, and I think Navy will keep it going. And I got to ask DJ now, our producer. DJ, have Pete and I committed the Cardinals in? Do we have the same picks on every single game?
So I can confirm, because I was typing it in, you have the same picks on every single
We're going to get slaughtered. Fade us.
Hotty toddy.
The only difference right now is Ryan took Ole Miss.
Hotty toddy.
So
that's the only difference?
Only difference for the entire segment.
Okay, that's no good. That stinks. I've got to change something here, which is not what you do. You go with your gut initially. So I'm gonna change one. Since Ryan has changed that one, I was going to change to Ole Miss. You know what? I've got to believe it. I don't believe any of these other ones. Yeah, what the heck? Give me Ole Miss at home. I'll go. I'll go Ole Miss at home.
There you go.
Against that too. I almost went Oregon. There, I almost went Oregon just to have some difference. We got to have something on the line.
Well, I'm telling you right now, once you watch E60, The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin on Wednesday night at 7:00 on ESPN, you're definitely going to want to pick Ole Miss. So there you go.
And perhaps someday there will be an E60, the Many Lives, the Many Hats of Ryan McGee.
Yeah, no. As Greg Sankey says, how old are you? Because you're in all these documentaries like you're at these. Ryan looks remarkably young for a man who was sitting next to Grantland Rice in the press box. He's outlined against the blue-gray October sky. That's right. We had a whole conversation. Is it blue-gray or is it gray-blue? I don't know, Grant. What do you think? Clickety-clack.
Guys, this was fun. Ryan, can't wait to see the documentary, the 60 special that you guys have put together, and also there's an sort of an extended cut version on the app. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, that's correct. On the ESPN app, there'll be an extended kind of director's cut version of it. And Maddie and Jason, the co-directors, are working on that as we speak. Maybe they'll find somewhere in there for Landry's who Landry's dating. But yeah, it'll be available on the app after it premieres, and it'll re-air also the 1 hour cut. I'm confident throughout the fall.
Awesome.
I wish those two loving youngsters nothing but the best.
Oh yeah.
I hope this is if this is the romance that they want. I wish them well.
Well,
but what if this is all a big psyop and she's just distracting Weeks for the game, and then is going to say, hotty toddy immediately after the game, and moving on.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody thought about that, and I wouldn't put it past any coach, but particularly the one that's in Oxford, and she loves her dad, so who knows? Yeah, I've written stories about married couples. One went to Alabama, one went to Auburn, and one day a year they just don't talk. And we'll see if Landry and her new boyfriend talk on Saturday.
How in the world would two people who one went to Alabama, one went to Auburn, how would they actually marry?
I wrote a story for ESPN the magazine, and we did a photo shoot with both of them in different recliners and their poor 2-year-old son standing in the middle of the room, and he looks so sad. I'm like, that's just how it is. Yeah, secretly changing the baby into a onesie of the other team when the other spouse was at work. So that's how that works.
Pete, have you ever heard of such a thing?
I don't know. I don't know what kind of couple could function in life like that. I just have no sense.
I heard rumor of this one couple who did that, and it's been wedded bliss for 31 going on 32 years now.
Well,
I think this couple also is going to celebrate the marriage of their daughter this weekend. Hopefully people.
How could you ever make that work? Hey, by the way, speaking of which, my Knoxville born and raised wife is really happy about me working on this Lane Kiffin documentary. As are my in-laws, my roommates, everyone. So I know a group that won't be watching it, but
they'll hate watch it. They'll hate watch it. Don't even think they won't hate watch it.
Yeah, we'll leave this up. We'll leave it on this note. Has she forgiven? Has your lovely bride? And by the way, people who missed the reference, I went to Alabama. My wife went to Auburn. I think most people know that. If you've listened to this podcast, Pete's made it abundantly clear a few times. Yeah. But as your wife, no, I'm glad you did that, Pete. That's one of the things in the podcast. You and I are, sometimes we're a little guarded. We probably ought to let people know us a little bit. Ryan, has your wife forgiven Lane Kiffin for the one and done?
No, she and no one in Knoxville has. That's interesting because every time I post a clip from the show or whatever, I don't hear from Raiders fans. I don't hear from USC fans. I literally hear from all of my orange people. But yeah,
guys, this was fun. Thanks for joining us on the College GameDay Podcast. Don't miss the many lives of Lane Kiffin. It is debuting on Wednesday night, and we look forward to seeing you from Happy Valley Saturday morning on College GameDay.